Okay, so I already did a one whole, like, 3 hour recording trying to figure out what is wrong with this. God, I don't even know where to start. I honestly just. What do you. How. I think I've got it now. Because the basic premise should work, right? The basic premise is fine. Appreciate what you have and not what you've lost. That's all great. And the whole, building it around a brother's relationship, and that's all fine. But I think so much of it just seemed just kind of unsure of itself. So many of the scenes were they felt kind of cut short, or they would just cut to the B plot and then cut back. And it's like, it felt like there weren't moments where they would just kind of appreciate a moment, or really, they won't just let a moment be. And it just kind of, wreak all of the, I don't know, narrative or dramatic or emotional anything out of it. Things would just happen too fast. And it just felt like they were just kind of jumping from one line, not even one scene to the next, one line to the next. Like, there's this scene in when they're, well, first when they go into the tavern, that was just, it's this great, awesome, spooky tavern. You've promised us this amazing tavern, and then he just anticlimactically opens the door and it's a birthday party. That's just now pure disappointment, right? Because, personally, I find the whole thing where, magic used to be in this world but isn't anymore, and now we have modern conveniences. That's not like a novel twist or anything. That to me is just pure disappointment, and this was another one of those moments. Where it feels like normally they would have, open the door but not show us what's in it yet, so they would have had a lot of close-up shots of oh god, the horror, like a bait and switch, and then ta-da, it's just a birthday party. That would have at least been cute or entertaining, but instead it's just they just open the door and it's a birthday party. That wasn't funny, that wasn't entertaining, that wasn't dramatic, that wasn't even annoyingly manipulative. It was just pure disappointment and kind of anticlimactic. And there were so many moments like that. So, and then later in the tavern, they're trying to find the map, and they're talking to the lady, and she's just got line after line, and they're just going back and forth. It kind of just goes on. And then she's like, "Well, where's the real map?" She's like, "Oh, it's over there." And they look over, like, "Oh, it's on the wall." And they're like, "Yay!" And then in one shot, they go up to the map, take it off the wall, and then the lady says, "Hey, no, you can't take that," and takes the map away from them. All inside of 2 seconds. That all happens. We don't even get to really appreciate the map. It's gotta be this cool old thing. You'd think at least Barley would really get into the discovery of this map and be like, "Oh, wow, it's an old map, and look how cool it is, and it's, oh god, it smells like adventure or something." Oh, look at the edges, and just really, really getting into how cool this map is. And then, snash, and then they gotta take it away. But they don't. And then later, they burn up the map. I'm sorry, were you under the impression we were attached to that map? Because, no, you would have had to put in the legwork, and you didn't. I still can't get over that. It was such a weird moment. I think the reason they did that was because they didn't want them to look at the map. They didn't want them to be able to carry on without it, so that when it's destroyed, it's oh no, they didn't even get to look at it, now they'll be lost forever. That's just a shitty reason to not want the map to burn up. You'd think you'd want to be attached to it because it's cool, and we have emotional attachments to it like Barley, instead of just, oh no, now trying to get along without it is going to be annoying. That's not the reason you want us to be attached to something. And then suddenly there's a beam that's gonna fall on his dad, and he just does the spell. And it feels like it should have been a more dramatic moment. Almost all of the spells that really should have been. Especially the final spell, where he finally does the big magic Voltar, I can't remember the name of it, but it's supposed to be the hardest spell in the book. And it comes right at this moment after he's decided that, Barley was a great substitute for his dad, and he learned so much from him, and he appreciates everything he does for him, and everything he taught him. And then he's gonna go cast the spell that he couldn't cast before, the hardest one, and he just does. It's like, oh no, and then it's done. He just casts it. Like, shouldn't there have been some build-up? You know, Barley was always going on about the decrees. You stand a certain way, and you've gotta use your heart fire, and you've gotta focus, and learning, thinking about all the things that Barley taught him in that moment. That we've just had this moment with Barley, and he now appreciates him so much. He's gonna think about all the things his brother taught him in order to cast the spell properly. You don't think that might have been a good time to do that? Apparently not. But yeah, there was a lot of moments like that should have been more. They should have made more out of the moment. Built up to it, made it more dramatic, more emotional. Just taking their time with the really important moments, and they just didn't. They seemed to just rush through everything. Not everything. There were, a few good moments, like the moment where he realizes that Barley is so important to him and he's crossed off all the things. That was a boring list, by the way. I think they made it boring so they could make it so it was really easy to actually tick off the boxes. But it didn't say very much for Ian's character that he made a really boring list. Like, that's what you want to show your dad? Are you sure? But yeah, I think that was most of the issue. It needed touches. It needed touches here and there to just make the important moments more important. Oh, and when they're coming up, they beat the final trap, right? They finally got Dad to stand on the switch, opens the thing, and they get out. There's a half split second where they look at each other and laugh. And you think that this should be an important moment between them. It's like, oh my god, we just died. But we didn't. It was great. We solved the puzzle together. No, it's just straight up the ladder, climb straight out, and they're back at the high school. Which, I mean, in the first place, I don't ever want high schools in my fantasy. And I'm talking about Harry Potter. That's a school you want to go to because they teach magic there. This world has gone out of its way to explain that is just a normal high school. There is nothing special about it whatsoever. It is the same, it's the same high school we're all afraid of. It's the dragon, right? I don't care. When they came up out of that hole and saw the high school, it was just like, I could have cried. It was just, stupid high school. You're expecting something amazing. Something cool we've been building up to, and then it's just this ultimate letdown. You're at school. You were promised a fantasy adventure, and you finally get to the boss battle, and you're at school. I think that was a nightmare I had one time. This was not just like, oh no, this was not me emulating the character's emotions. This was just pure, it's a high school. And I understand they wanted the high school to be the dragon. They wanted the high school to be this big, imposing thing that Ian had to get over. But it's so cliche, I just couldn't get into it. They had the same scene, standing in front of the high school, talking to the kids, and then Barley drives up and embarrasses him in front of the friends he's trying to impress. It was just like Spider-Verse did that last year. Or was it the year before? It's already such a cliche. Why would you try that again? Ugh. I think that's another big issue is Ian was really boring. Ugh. But yeah, so I'm talking about the moment before they come up into the high school, after they've beat the water trap, and they should have been a moment where they shared together and really wallow in the good emotions that you've earned. And same as they're going through the tunnel and they're playing spells and they're having a good time and they're talking to each other. Everything felt too fast. Too fast, too cheap, like it was cut down to nothing. And I wonder is Ian just too boring? I realized, I don't even know what this kid does in his spare time. He said something about a math award. I think that's one of the only personal details we get about him is, other than he wants to spend time with his dad in the most generic, cliched way imaginable. Like, you realize Barley wanting to spend time with his dad, that has some layers. He's an interesting character. He's into all this stuff, and he's got a van, and, this is a character. There's been work put into his characterization and everything that he does with his time. He's out protecting monuments from being demolished. He's got shit going on. What does Ian do besides strive to be normal, or I guess just strive to be his dad? He's imagined that his dad that he doesn't know, is this personality that he wants to emulate without even really knowing what it is. I really hope they didn't hold back in actually making Ian more of an interesting character, because he's kind of shy and neurotic and quirky, but like we already have Linguini. I still can't believe they named a character Linguini. But he's quirky and clumsy enough to be entertaining. Hiccup, same kind of character, but he's entertaining enough to actually hold our attention. This character just struggles every second to hold on to my attention. I don't care. I find myself just waiting. It's like, well, hopefully Barley will have a line and will say something interesting, because Ian has nothing to contribute to any dialogue. I don't know. Yeah, so I'm wondering if Ian wasn't maybe too boring, and that's why a lot of this just kind of, it keeps it on a very generic level. Like, they want him so bad to be the every kid. Like, I don't want to watch a movie about an every kid. You've made a character. A character should be a work of art. Show us, what makes Ian interesting. Why do we care about this character's story? Just wanting to see his dad, that's not enough. We should probably actually convince us that his dad would want to see him. I'm not convinced he wouldn't have been disappointed. Good thing he didn't actually see him in the end. That sounds harsh. But he shows up and he's like, that's another thing that didn't make sense. Barley's like, Dad is so proud of the man you turned into. But they made it clear that their dad can't actually hear anything that's going on. But I guess because Barley told them that he gave up his time for him, that's what he was going off of, maybe? They probably should have made that clear. And then there's like, oh, they think that was because of you. I was like, yeah, he kind of said that too. The first time I saw that, I thought they were meaning that Ian was, had taken after Barley, wasn't just, had good traits that Barley had taught him. I mean, I wish Ian was taking after Barley. That might actually be interesting. But you could kind of tell in the end, where they're going off in the van, and he's going to use his magic to make the van fly away right at the very, very end. And Ian's, I don't know, he says something like, the path is not always the most obvious or something. And like him trying to be Barley in that, it just didn't work. I wonder if this isn't a voice acting problem. Is it Tom Holland who does Ian? Yeah, that probably could have been a bit more character to their voice. I don't know. I don't know if he really brought all that much. Overall, it's just a very, fine, accomplishes everything it sets out to, but just a very meh movie. I really think it just needed to make more of the moments it had, or just make the moments that you had more interesting, if in any way possible. Just whatever you got, make it more interesting. I definitely think the dad just being a set of legs. This movie feels like a lot of Pixar movies. With the whole, we have to trust Barley despite the fact that he's, doesn't seem very reliable. That whole felt like Dory. Oh, Pixar really likes these characters. They love characters that seem unreliable and then them to have surprising wisdom. And then it also felt like Brave with the whole, I cast a spell on my parents and I have 24 hours to turn it around. Pixar just doesn't seem to do magic very well. They don't really seem to know how to get it into the story. So, the dad thing. The pants. Their dad is just a pair of pants. It doesn't really function as a third character, even. It's just a pair of pants. I guess somebody thought this was incredibly clever or just weird enough to be intriguing. Like, yeah, that's a good hook. No, a pair of pants can't do anything. It's not like a sidekick that can be cute or tell jokes or be interesting or entertaining in some other way. But yeah, this is not a character. I think if they had a different way to represent Dad and they have to carry it around with him, but that he's only half a spell, I don't know, but just having him as half a pair of pants is just, that didn't work. And I wonder if I'm not biased even just from the trailer, because the setting, I hate the setting. I hate the whole fantasy with modern elements. That's awful. Who thought that was a good idea? No. The whole point of the fantasy is that it is an escape. You can't have a fantasy and then put cars and cops and high schools and phones and modern crap and modern problems into... No. I think they thought this was, a novel approach. They were gonna, this will redefine fantasy in the Pixar canon. It's Disney, they have a long, proud history of fantasy, right? They've got fantasy, they've got fairy tales, they've done it forever. They're very comfortable with it. Pixar, not so much. They're still trying to find out what a Pixar fantasy looks like. I'm gonna pray they haven't found it yet, because please don't let it be this. Please don't ever do this again. No. I go to fantasies to escape, to get away from things like high school, modern technology, and role-playing games. What? And fans, fantasy fans. I'm watching a fantasy about a fantasy fan who has to play a role-playing game in order to immerse himself in a fantasy world. So I'm watching an escapist fantasy about somebody else who's trying to escape into a fantasy. What have you done? You've corrupted the escapism. I don't want to go to a fantasy and watch a fantasy fan try to do what I'm trying to do. It's like, look, they're trying to escape into a fantasy too, just like you. Well, great. I guess nobody got to escape then. I mean, they obviously did get to escape as they went on the adventure, but just the setting. Oh! And then in the prologue, they had that whole thing where the whole reason they abandoned magic was because it was apparently too hard, right? Turning on a light bulb is easier than learning a light spell. And if a light spell is that hard, it then implies that Ian learned these really, especially, apparently, the hardest spell to learn in the book in 24 hours. They had to know that was going to be a problem. It's just, yeah, so their whole premise is kind of turned on its head when Ian just learned spells probably way too quickly. And I think that could have been helped, again, if they just slowed down and really tried to sell. The bridge part, I think, was pretty good. They really had to make him believe to make the spell work. I think, that all worked fine. But the rest of it all felt way too easy. And honestly, I just think the whole subplot where they're, trying to make the world magic again was probably not a great idea. Isn't it kind of admitting that your setting is crap and it needs to be fixed? It just kind of feels like an admission, like, yep, this is awful. No one wants this. We know that. But don't worry. It'll be fixed by the end of the movie. You'll get to see it fixed in the last 20 seconds or so. It'll all be set right again. It's like, no, I'd rather really would have just watched a fantasy. There's a normal one. Would have been kind of cool. Like, Barley's is a very modern character type. It'd be maybe fun to put him in an actual fantasy. That could be entertaining. That might be the turn, but I don't know. I did not like the setting, and I think probably, the CG feature look is wearing on me as well, especially when we've got things like Spider-Verse now shaking it up. We now know there's really not a lot of excuse not to have an original looking feature, especially if you're Pixar, or even things like what they did with the Peanuts movie. This is now looking very kind of bleh. Oh, so yeah, I guess those are my thoughts. Just fine, but pretty mediocre. It needed a lot of just little things here and there to really pump up whatever good things there were about it. I felt like the voice acting was kind of just okay throughout. Like, even you have good voice actors, like, they were all good voice actors, but a lot of them felt like they needed another take on that, and I didn't care about the entire last fight with the dragon, which you'd think, how do you mess up a fight scene with a dragon? Anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts on Onward. Really could say I wish I would ever watch it again, but I can't see any reason why I would, which is very sad.